Hello, and welcome to Nighttime Fables, a haven where stories come to life under the gentle hush of evening, guiding you toward a peaceful night's rest. Tonight, we bring you another calming tale, one crafted to ease your mind and invite a sense of tranquil calm. But first, let's take a few moments to prepare both body and mind for a restful sleep. Make yourself comfortable, and with each slow inhale and gentle exhale, feel the day's worries slowly melt away. It can be challenging to separate from the bustle of the day, especially as bedtime nears. Yet remember, the less we fret about falling asleep, the more our minds can let go of lingering tension. Let the gentle flow of your breathing soothe any concerns and allow tonight's story to guide you into a deep, restorative slumber. Now get cozy and let the soft glow of nighttime fables envelope you. Enjoy this story, and may it lead you into a serene and restful sleep. A frost, sudden and absolute, had claimed the kingdom, locking it in a perpetual winter that refused the very notion of spring. An age unfurled under its reign. Children were born into the chill, grew to maturity, their lives measured only in deepening snows, never having known a thaw. The burgeoning green of trees, the kiss of summer sun, these were mere phantoms conjured in fireside tales by elders whose memories held the lost seasons. These winter-born souls, lacking context for warmth, struggled to grasp such concepts. The pastels they recognized painted the twilight sky, not fields of ephemeral blooms. Verdancy, to them, was the stoic, unchanging hue of the fir and pine. Nature, in its grand majority, was simply white, an endless canvas upon which their parents sketched visions of rolling emerald hills, sun-drenched wildflowers, and rivers like shattered sapphire, images they could only approximate in the cold theater of their minds. Why this unending ice age had descended remained shrouded in conjecture. Yet, one certainty held. Concurrent with winter's arrival, a colossal glacial peak had thrust itself into the kingdom's heart. So slick, so sheer, so utterly unassailable was its surface that it earned the name the Shard Spire. Whispers claimed this ominous monolith was the handiwork of a frost mage, who, slighted in some forgotten quarrel with King Valerius, had condemned the monarch and his daughter to eternal isolation upon its summit. Countless narratives, spun beside flickering hearths, recounted the fates of men who dared the ascent, bearing tokens intended to win the captive princess's hand. Alas, the summit proved virtually unattainable, guarded, the stories insisted, by an immense, terrifying avian sentinel of ice and wind. Every aspirant, every knight and farmer alike met failure, sliding defeated back to the mountain's base. Even those equipped with axes or picks seeking purchase on the glassy inclines eventually relinquished their tools, forced to contend barehanded with the monstrous bird. To scale the spire and withstand the winged guardian seemed a task beyond mortal capacity. Near the mountain's imposing foot lived Corin, a young man whose entire existence unfolded within the shadow of that immense ice monument. He absorbed the legends, witnessed the procession of hopefuls return broken. Like all his generation, winter was the only season he comprehended. Though tales of summer sparked a curious intrigue, he felt no innate longing for what he couldn't truly imagine. Yet, Corin possessed a keen mind and an appetite for challenge. His days were consumed by chores, aiding his parents in their struggle against the cold's austerity. But in stolen moments, he'd glide across the village pond, etching graceful arcs on the ice, his gaze often drifting upward to the glittering, indifferent peak. As manhood approached, a singular ambition took root: to be the one who conquered the spire, who reached the princess. While village girls offered uncomplicated affection, Corin craved the unknown that lay beyond his snowbound hamlet, a life punctuated by more than the rhythm of survival. He pondered the glistening enigma, turning the problem over and over until a plan, almost startling in its simplicity, crystallized. One evening, at the rough-hewn table beside the family hearth, he unveiled his intention. He would employ his ice skates, their blades biting into the slope, anchoring him securely while leaving his hands free to fend off the fabled guardian. His mother's face clouded with worry, envisioning disaster in this audacious scheme. His father, equally dubious, questioned how Corin could possibly prevail where seasoned worldly men had faltered. How would mere hands suffice against such a beast? What offering could he, a simple villager, possibly present to royalty? Corin conceded the gaps in his strategy, but remained unyielding. The climb was set for the morrow. His mother's anxious whispers found the neighbor's ear. The neighbor, in hushed tones, relayed it to her daughter. The daughter informed the boy across the lane. Like wildfire on dry tinder, the news swept the village. Thus, when Corin emerged, prepared to confront the mountain, the entire populace had gathered, a silent, expectant audience. With a rucksack containing a loaf of bread and a flask of water, he slung his skates, blades tied together, over one shoulder. Ignoring the collective stare, he lowered his gaze and strode purposefully towards the mysterious spire. Their skepticism would not deter him. As he trod the path winding towards the mountain's base, each deep breath steadied his resolve. The curious throng trailing behind faded from his focus. His plan remained stark: ascend with skates, repel the bird with hands, hope his lack of a formal gift wouldn't bar his way. Beyond this, he carried no contingency. The woods stood sentinel around him, draped in their perpetual, sparkling shroud of snow. Each footfall, thud, crunch, echoed unnaturally in the profound stillness, a rhythm that paradoxically calmed him, drawing him into a meditative state. And then he was there. Before him reared a precipitous, sheer wall of glistening ice, devoid of any discernible handhold or foothold. Corin felt the weight of the villagers' eyes watching from the tree line. He shrugged the skates from his shoulder, dropped his pack, seating himself on a frost-covered boulder. He exchanged his heavy boots for the skates, tucking the boots into his rucksack. He might need them at the summit. Then he rose and faced the indomitable obstacle. Securing the rucksack, he took a tentative step, driving the toe pick of one skate blade into the ice. He stepped up, planting the other blade slightly higher. The incline was severe, yet just shallow enough to allow him to lean forward, bracing himself with his hands against the slick, cold surface. Methodically, painstakingly, one foot above the other, he commenced the climb. Pick, step, hoist. Pick, step, hoist. Corin surrendered to the slow cadence, refusing to look aside upward or, most perilously, down. Time and fatigue became abstract concepts he willfully ignored. The knot of villagers dissolved from his conscious thought. Gradually, he sensed a shift, climbing out of the mountain's deep morning shadow into a zone where the weak winter sun struck the ice directly. The sight was breathtaking. The mountain, simultaneously translucent and impenetrable, fractured the light into infinite internal reflections, glittering like a colossal, faceted crystal. As he ascended higher, this reflected brilliance intensified, becoming almost blinding, refracting endlessly within the glacial slope, casting dazzling rays outward. Yet, paradoxically, the air grew colder. An insistent, icy breeze whipped around his head and shoulders, its ceaseless whistling a droning counterpoint to his efforts. He had lost all track of time. His concentration was finally pierced by a different sound. A distant cry carried on the wind. Faint at first, it swelled, drawing nearer. Tilting his face skyward, squinting against the glare, he searched for the source. The infamous guardian. At first, only blinding light met his eyes. Then, abruptly, impossibly large wings eclipsed the sun. The sudden shadow brought no relief, only the certainty that the creature was descending upon him. It struck in a blizzard of white feathers, a maelstrom of beating wings buffeting his head. Digging his skate blades deeper for purchase, Corin instinctively threw his arms up, ducking beneath them. He flailed, trying to swat the creature away, but it pressed its advantage. He knew, with chilling clarity, that without swift action, he would lose his footing and plummet down the slope, another failed adventurer claimed by the spire. Turning his face upward with sudden resolve, he saw the bird's dark taloned feet hovering directly above. Acting purely on instinct, he shot both hands up, seizing the powerful black legs, one in each fist. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure indignation. Then it began to rise. Its mighty wings beat the air, showering Corin and the mountainside with fine, glittering frost. He clung on desperately as the bird surged upward, wrenching his skates free from the ice. He was airborne, ascending, up, up, aloft. As if striving to shed this irksome burden, the white eagle poured all its strength into flight, carrying Corin high above the spire, soaring towards the summit. He squeezed his eyes shut initially, but after moments passed, he dared to open them, glancing down. The glistening ice rushed past beneath him at incredible speed. To his sides, the snow-locked kingdom spread out below. Miniature houses, toy trees, tiny, meandering roads forming an unreal storybook panorama. The vista was magnificent, yet his skates felt like lead weights, and the strain in his arms screamed that his grip could not hold much longer. The ascent leveled off. They were now skimming across a flat, icy expanse at the mountain's peak. Just as Corin felt his strength utterly fail, a singular, resplendent golden tree materialized ahead. It stood utterly alone in the world of white, radiating a brilliant, warm-hued light in all directions. Its countless small leaves seemed to shimmer with an inner life, the sole vibrant thing in the frozen landscape. Uncertain if the landing would be survivable, but seeing no alternative, Corin waited as the eagle swooped low over the tree. He released his hold. He landed hard amidst a cascade of musical vibrations, like 1,000 tiny chimes ringing out. Disoriented, it took him a moment to gather his wits. Cautiously, he sat up. He found himself inside the largest bird's nest imaginable, woven not of twigs, but seemingly of solidified light and frost, cradled within the golden canopy. At the nest's heart lay a massive, glittering egg, intensely gold in the ambient light, large enough to overwhelm his rucksack. Closer inspection revealed it was anchored fast by layers of ice and frost, seemingly fused to the nest floor, as if it had rested there for an eternity. Crawling nearer, Corin touched the egg's smooth, cold surface. He pushed gently. It was frozen solid. He couldn't dislodge it without risking damage. Yet, he desired this prize. It was the only thing he'd found worthy of offering the princess. Sitting back, he thought intently. An idea sparked. Reaching into his pack, he retrieved his water flask, kept warm against his body. Unscrewing the cap, he carefully poured the lukewarm liquid over the egg's base. As he'd hoped, the slight warmth was enough to begin melting the ancient frost. Slowly, the icy bonds contracted and vanished, revealing the pure golden shell beneath. The moment he felt it shift, Corin gently rocked the egg. With minimal resistance, it came free. His triumph was short-lived. The wintry eagle had returned. Screaming its outrage, it dove back toward the tree, clearly intent on reclaiming its treasure. Glancing wildly about, Corin snatched the only available object, the loaf of bread, from his pack. As the eagle's talons descended towards him once more, he thrust the bread into their grasp. Mistaking it for its prize, the bird gave a triumphant squawk and soared away, its cries fading into the vast, cold sky. Corin sat very still, relief washing over him in a wave. Once certain the eagle was truly gone, he turned back to the egg. He removed his boots from the rucksack and carefully nestled the golden orb inside, securing the flap. Then, he took off his skates, donned his boots once more, and slung the skates over his shoulder. Leaving the pack momentarily, he stood carefully within the enormous nest, scanning the summit. Initially, only a vast expanse of blinding white met his gaze. The frosty peak seemed utterly barren, reflecting the sun's rays with unrelenting brilliance. Shielding his eyes, he thought he detected a faint, distant sparkle. He held his breath, waiting. It flashed again. Something else existed out there. Whether it was the fabled castle or not, it was the sole feature disturbing the icy monotony. He resolved to walk towards it. With the precious egg now a heavy weight upon his back, he carefully climbed down through the golden branches and descended to the icy ground. Hoisting the rucksack properly, he began the trek towards the mysterious glimmer. Time dissolved as he traversed the frozen plain. The biting cold numbed his face and fingers. The constant glare wearied his eyes. The sun, visibly lower now, suggested mid-afternoon. He desperately hoped to reach his destination before nightfall, for there was no other shelter to be found. He made steady progress across the ice sheet, thankfully unmolested by the white eagle. As he drew nearer, the softening afternoon light resolved the distant sparkle into a structure that grew larger with each step. Soon, he was certain, it was the castle from the village tales. And what a palace of ice it was! As if sculpted by elemental forces, its towers and turrets soared skyward in immense, glittering formations. An impossibly tall, delicate fortress of light, mirroring the shifting colors of the sky. As sunset approached, it became a canvas of orange, pink, and gold. He reached the front and paused before a drawbridge, frozen solid in its lowered position across the moat. The moat itself was a river of ice winding smoothly around the fortress. Picking his way cautiously across the bridge, he stopped before a pair of enormous, crystalline doors. Having reached the limit of his plan, knowing nothing of what lay beyond, he did the only thing that seemed logical. He knocked. The sound reverberated within the glass castle, sharp and brittle, as if it were the first such disturbance in an age. It shuddered through the interior, seeming both infinite and fragile. He waited through what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, ponderously, one of the great doors began to creak open. Shivering with the effort, as though recalling a long-forgotten function, the portal yielded. Pushing with all her might at the base of the towering door stood a young woman. She wore a simple white gown beneath a heavy cloak, topped incongruously, yet practically, with a fuzzy blue muffler and woolly earmuffs. She stared at Corin with wide-eyed astonishment, opened her mouth as if to speak, then seemed to reconsider. Taking a deep breath, she asked with surprising assertiveness precisely who he was. Corin, unsure what he had anticipated, was certainly not prepared for a direct interrogation by the princess herself. He stammered that he hailed from the village below the mountain, and if she were amenable, he wished to rescue her. The words sounded faintly absurd once spoken aloud. The princess regarded him dubiously. He became acutely aware of his less than heroic appearance, clutching skates and a rucksack, lacking sword or armor. Then his expression brightened. "I found something special," he offered. "May I bring it inside?" Her interest clearly piqued. She nodded. Stepping aside with a guarded look, she gestured towards the vast, cold hall within. Corin entered. It felt as frigid inside as out. He understood her preference for earmuffs. Before he could present his gift, she straightened. "I am Lysandra," she stated simply. He managed an awkward bow, offering his own name. She inclined her head graciously. "So then, Corin, what have you brought me?" He swung the rucksack from his shoulder, opened it, and slowly drew out the glittering golden egg. Lysandra's eyes widened at the sight. She gently took it from his hands. He recounted his entire journey: the climb, the eagle, the nest. Hearing his tale, she confirmed she had often seen the great white eagle circling the spire. Suspecting it was the transformed shape of the frost mage who had cursed them long ago, She explained sadly that her father, King Valerius, had departed the castle years past, seeking the mage to plead for their release, but had never returned. And so she remained, trapped in time, never aging through the endless winter. Corin expressed his sympathy, but Lysandra seemed preoccupied by the egg she held. Shifting it between her palms, she exclaimed, "Corin, it's growing warmer." As they watched, the egg began to glow, suffused with an internal luminescence. Its golden surface, previously static, seemed to ripple and shift. Uncertain, Lysandra carefully placed the egg on the center flagstone and stepped back. The egg pulsed brighter, bathing the hall in a warm, golden radiance. Lysandra pulled off her muffler, murmuring about the sudden heat. Corin realized he too felt intensely warm. Instinctively retreating further, they noticed water beginning to drip all around them. The sound of trickling grew into a babble, then a rush. The castle was melting. Without a word exchanged, they flung open the massive doors and scrambled outside, back across the icy moat. Turning, they witnessed an incredible metamorphosis. The structure dissolved from its core outward, a brilliant light erupting skyward like a geyser of fire into the twilight. With a deep rumble, the center collapsed, sending waves of water surging into the now liquid moat. To the utter astonishment, a magnificent bird of fiery orange and red soared upward from the ruins, pausing to flap its wings above the remnants of the ice palace. Each downbeat sent waves of warmth cascading outwards, thawing the moat and flooding the surrounding summit. Corin knew they had to descend immediately. As the great phoenix circled, crying out above them, he decided to gamble once more. Dropping his heavy skates, he told Lysandra to hold on to him tightly. She obeyed, linking her arms around his neck. Then, as the beautiful fiery creature swooped low overhead, he reached up and grasped its feet, clinging with the same desperate tenacity he'd shown with the frosty eagle. Without protest, the phoenix carried them aloft. The fragile ice palace vanished below as the ground itself seemed to melt and subside. The triumphant bird soared across the mountaintop, then plunged downwards, heading directly for the village lights twinkling far below. The once slippery mountainside streamed past, now slick with rivulets of meltwater. The wind rushing past their faces was powerful, astonishingly warm. They squeezed their eyes shut, concentrating solely on holding fast. Then, abruptly, their feet brushed the earth. They released the bird, tumbling in a heap onto the damp ground in the clearing at the mountain's base. The phoenix surged upward, a fantastic, glowing orb against the night sky, then vanished into the distance with a final cry, leaving behind a shower of fading sparks like drifting embers. Corin and Lysandra lay in the wet snow, gazing skyward, gasping for breath. After several moments of stunned silence, they turned to face each other and burst into laughter. They had succeeded. Lysandra was free. Corin was home. The villagers, having long since abandoned their vigil, were snug by their firesides. No one witnessed Corin's return through the moonlit, dripping woods with an unknown young woman on his arm. It was, therefore, a considerable shock to his parents when the son reappeared miraculously on their doorstep. His mother, overcome, dropped the stew pot with a clatter. By morning, the world was utterly transformed. A warm, steady rain drenched the land. The snow and ice had almost entirely vanished. The rain persisted for a full day before finally ceasing, allowing the sun to break through. When the first truly warm rays of spring touched the kingdom after generations of cold, the village erupted in celebration. As weeks turned into months, the children learned the forgotten language of seasons. They discovered the true green of grass, the riotous colors of spring flowers, the deep hues of summer, the burnished tones of autumn. Birds, small and cheerful, filled the air with song. Prosperity bloomed alongside the wildflowers. And when Corin asked Lysandra, the erstwhile winter princess, for her hand, he presented her not with gold, but with a vibrant bouquet, bursting with every color of the newly awakened rainbow. Kenjiro, a tiller of soil whose days were measured by sun and sweat, labored in the fields bordering his hamlet. One afternoon, the heavens wept, a sudden downpour chasing him and his fellow workers from their toil. Laughter echoed as they sprinted for refuge beneath the sprawling arms of an ancient cedar, its canopy a vast green shield. Safe within this dry haven, they declared an early respite, unpacking lunches amidst the gentle percussion of raindrops drumming far above. Rice wine flowed, conversation meandered, drifting on the easy currents of long familiarity. As Kenjiro savored his meal, a tiny flutter of wings, iridescent against the grey rain, alighted upon his knee. A butterfly escaped from the deluge. His hand rose instinctively to brush it away, but an elder, his face a map of seasons past, stayed his movement. "Hold," the old man murmured, his voice raspy like dry leaves. "That is no mere insect. It is said the butterfly carries the sleeper's spirit, weaving dreams as it wanders the world." A curious notion, Kenjiro mused. Belief felt distant, yet he let the creature rest undisturbed. Moments later, glancing down, he found the spot vacant. The butterfly had vanished as silently as it arrived. Soon, a pleasant warmth bloomed in Kenjiro's belly, courtesy of savory broth and glutinous rice. Contentment settled over him like a soft blanket. He leaned back, the rough bark of the giant cedar a solid presence against his spine. The low hum of his friends' voices became a lullaby, his thoughts loosening, drifting away on the rain-scented air. Sleep claimed him swiftly, effortlessly. He surfaced slowly, drawn back towards wakefulness. The thought surfaced. How pleasant to slumber beneath a tree, inhaling the sharp, clean perfume of cedar on the damp breeze. Yet as Kenjiro lay nestled against the wood, a stillness registered. The comforting murmur of his companion's talk had ceased. He blinked his eyes open to profound solitude amongst the cedar's gnarled roots. No one. Only the persistent drip, drip, drip of water falling from leaf to patient leaf below. His friends, he reasoned, must have slipped back to the fields, leaving him to his rest. But the landscape offered no sign of them. A thin mist now curled through the trees, blurring the edges of the world, thickening with each passing second. Kenjiro strained his eyes against the swirling white. Out of the densest part of the fog, shapes emerged, coalescing into figures walking towards him. A procession, large and strangely silent. As they drew nearer, their attire banished any thought of his farmer friends. Such opulent silks, such intricate gold pins fastening midnight hair, such exquisitely crafted sandals. These were not the garments of field hands. Recognition dawned. Royalty. He scrambled upright, folding himself into a deep, respectful bow. The one who led them, an older man whose eyes held a surprising sparkle, approached. "Rise," he commanded gently. "No need for such deference. We were dispatched by the sovereign mistress of this realm. She seeks you, Kenjiro. Your assistance is required in a matter of great import." Kenjiro straightened, absorbing the sheer splendor of the delegation. Robes of crimson and gold shimmered, whispering with every slight movement in the almost still air. Their hair, uniformly raven black, was sculpted into elaborate coiffures. A cloud of fragrance enveloped them, an intoxicating blend unlike anything Kenjiro had ever encountered. Cinnamon, clove, and cardamom, woven with the sweetness of hibiscus, lilac, and jasmine, sharpened by hints of orange and pomegranate. It clung to them, an invisible banner announcing their noble passage. What could such magnificence want with him? There must be some mistake, he stammered, gesturing to his simple clothes beneath the damp air. I am merely Kenjiro, a farmer. Yet, if they had journeyed so far, whatever service I can offer, humble though it may be, is yours. The old man's smile was warm, reassuring. There is no mistake. The sovereign mistress named you specifically. They beckoned him forward. Bewildered but swayed by their utter certainty, Kenjiro felt an undeniable pull. He joined their ranks. They paused, granting him privacy to exchange his rough garb for robes of deep blue and shimmering silver they had brought. The traditional attire, they explained, for a guest of the court. Slipping into the garments, Kenjiro had to concede if they were mistaken. Their intended quarry must be his perfect double. The clothes fit flawlessly, as if tailored for his very frame. The procession turned, retracing its steps towards the sovereign mistress. Kenjiro swept along in their wake, utterly awestruck. He ran his fingers over the silk of his new robes, marveling. Impossibly light, it felt too delicate for the damp chill. Yet, it held a warmth that rivaled his thickest tunic. Even the sandals cradled his feet like moss. Lost in these newfound luxuries, he barely registered the passage of time or distance until they stood before the gates of a vast ethereal palace. Guards clad in crimson and gold swung the portals open, and they passed within. The sovereign mistress's audience chamber was a trove of wonders beyond Kenjiro's wildest imaginings. Tapestries woven with threads so fine they seemed spun from light itself, depicted pivotal moments from the kingdom's chronicles. The floor vanished beneath layers of plush rugs, soft animal furs, and intricately patterned bamboo mats of peerless quality. High above, the ceiling was pierced by myriad small, delicate glass panes. Kenjiro pictured himself lying there at twilight, watching the first stars ignite through those crystalline eyes. The sovereign mistress herself was draped in robes of the purest, most luminous cream fabric Kenjiro had ever beheld, while his own borrowed silks caught and reflected the lantern light. Hers seemed to possess an inner radiance. Crimson threads embroidered across the cream depicted clusters of small, round lychee fruits, rendered with such succulent realism, his mouth began to water just looking at them. Then she spoke. Her voice was a mere breath, yet it commanded the absolute silence of the chamber, each syllable carrying the undeniable weight of her authority. She explained they had observed Kenjiro for some time. His dedication to the land, his skill in coaxing life from the earth were exemplary. He possessed precisely the qualities needed to revitalize a certain jewel of her domain, a small island blessed with rich soil and industrious people, lately fallen upon leaner times. The entire realm, she declared, would owe him gratitude if he would consent to serve as its governor. Overwhelmed, seeing no other path, Kenjiro bowed his acceptance. A faint smile touched the sovereign mistress's lips. The choice, she knew, was sound. Kenjiro spent the ensuing days within the palace walls, preparing for his voyage to the island, which lay cradled in the midst of a wide, placid river. The sure improbability of his fortune left him railing, yet the demands of preparation kept his mind occupied, leaving little room for reflection. At last, the day of departure arrived. Accompanied by several advisors, Kenjiro began his journey. They traversed landscapes that felt like the whole breadth of the world, rolling hills draped in green, bustling cities, and quiet hamlets. The final stage required crossing the great river, accomplished aboard a graceful wooden vessel whose sails, billowing in the breeze, were the same creamy white as the sovereign mistress's robes. On the ship's deck, Kenjiro finally allowed his thoughts to quiet. Standing at the prow, he closed his eyes. He felt the sun's gentle warmth kiss the back of his hands. The clean air streamed through his hair, stray strands dancing against his cheek. Seabirds exchanged cries overhead, a counterpoint to the soft lapping of water against the hull. The vessel's serene rocking motion reminded him of his simple hammock back home, swaying in the summer wind. Soon, the island emerged from the river haze, a verdant jewel on the water. The ship glided towards the dock. The moment Kenjiro stepped ashore, he understood the sovereign mistress's words about the soil's fertility. The earth felt alive beneath his feet, springy and damp. Tall, luxuriant grasses carpeted every visible space, and magnificent trees soared toward the sky, offering dappled shade. His advisors guided him towards the governor's residence, his designated home and workplace. As they approached, they offered apologies for its modest scale compared to the sovereign mistress's palace. But Kenjiro, whose world had never extended beyond his family's farmstead, gazed in wonder. Smaller than the palace, yes, but the estate boasted numerous rooms filled with unimagined comforts, deeply cushioned chairs, soft rugs blanketing the floors, and a vast bed piled high with feathers. He knew instantly he would find contentment here. And indeed, he did. Though initially daunted by his new duties, over the course of his first year, Kenjiro immersed himself in the island's rhythms, learning the ways of its people. Working alongside them, sharing his farmer's wisdom, they achieved the first truly bountiful harvest the island had seen in over a decade. To mark this triumph, Kenjiro threw open the doors of his estate, hosting a magnificent feast for every man, woman, and child under his governance. So the seasons turned 15 times over. Kenjiro remained, transforming the island. Wild woodlands were gently tamed into orderly orchards, yielding the sweetest plums, cherries, and pears known in the land. Once fallow fields now produced such an abundance of rice and grain that it far exceeded the island's needs. Kenjiro ensured the surplus crossed the river, sharing the island's prosperity with the wider realm. He became a beloved figure, settling disagreements with fairness and gentle humor, presiding over joyous celebrations of births and marriages, and never entirely abandoning his roots, often finding solace working the soil alongside his people. Then, one day, a boat arrived bearing a messenger from the sovereign mistress. An attendant conveyed the summons. It was time for Kenjiro to return whence he came. His contributions, the attendant assured him, would be forever remembered by the sovereign mistress and the islanders alike. Sadness pricked Kenjiro. This place had become a true home. That evening, however, his advisors orchestrated a farewell celebration surpassing all previous festivities. A whirlwind of exquisite food, potent drink, and joyful dancing. When the last guest had departed and the echoes of music faded, Kenjiro sought his chambers. He sank into the immense feather bed, the mattress sighing as it enveloped him in a warm embrace. Consciousness began to fray, drifting towards sleep. But before succumbing, he cast one final look upward. Upon his arrival, he had requested a single modification to his room: the installation of small, delicate glass panes in the ceiling, portals to the night sky. Gazing up now, he watched the stars prick the darkness, twinkling like scattered diamonds. Within moments, sleep took him. The following morning, the sovereign mistress's attendant escorted him to the dock. The boat waited, silent upon the water, ready for the return journey. Kenjiro took a long, final look at his island. The thriving orchards, the fertile fields, the prosperous village nestled in the distance. The anchor was raised. As the boat pulled away, a fog began to roll across the water. It was peculiar, thick and opaque, yet strangely warm, soft like woven cotton. Soon, visibility shrank to mere feet. Kenjiro closed his eyes against the enveloping whiteness. When he opened them again, the boat was gone. He was back beneath a giant cedar, the familiar faces of his friends surrounding him. He blinked, disoriented, running his hands through the cool, damp earth, still moist from the earlier rain. One of the farmers chuckled at his bewildered movements. Enjoy your rest, Kenjiro. Slowly, Kenjiro asked, How long, how long was I asleep? The farmer regarded him with amusement. Barely long enough for the soup to cool. 10 minutes, perhaps. Then Kenjiro recounted his experience. The regal procession emerging from the mist, the perfumed air, the audience with the sovereign mistress, the journey to the island, the 15 years spent governing, the farewell, the foggy return. The others listened intently, their expressions shifting from amusement to puzzlement. When he finished, silence fell, broken only by the dripping leaves. What could it mean? Kenjiro whispered. His friends murmured amongst themselves, offering no clear answers. But then, the elder spoke again, the one who had remarked upon the butterfly. His voice was quiet, like wind sighing through tall grass. He explained that he had watched Kenjiro nod off against the tree. At the precise instant sleep claimed him, a small yellow butterfly had emerged from the folds of Kenjiro's tunic near his heart. The other men nodded. They recalled seeing the butterfly flit above the cedar, but hadn't noted its origin. The elder continued. The butterfly had settled on the cedar's bark, only to be approached by several ants. Gently, the tiny creatures had grasped the butterfly and carried it down into a small opening amongst the tree's roots. Minutes later, just before Kenjiro stirred and awoke, the same butterfly had reappeared from the hole and flown back into his tunic. Perhaps, the elder suggested softly, this shed light on the fantastic journey Kenjiro had just described. Intrigued, Kenjiro and the others knelt. Carefully they eased away the damp earth near the base of the cedar, revealing a miniature world, an ant colony. And there, nestled within it, was a sight that made Kenjiro gasp. A patch of earth, vibrant green with moss, was encircled by a rivulet of rainwater, forming a perfect, tiny island. Floating in this miniature stream was an infinitesimal boat, fashioned from a sliver of bark and a twig. Together, reverently, they replaced the soil, careful not to disturb the inhabitants further. By now, the rain had ceased entirely. After a few more hushed words, the farmers shouldered their tools and returned to the waiting fields. But Kenjiro lingered. That day remained etched in his memory. For the rest of his life, the dream of the island governed his thoughts. Ploughing his own familiar furrows, he would feel a phantom warmth on his back, recalling the silken robes. The taste of fruit from his trees would carry an echo of the island's harvest feasts, and every breeze whispering across the fields seemed to bear the faint, clean scent of the wide river surrounding his ephemeral home. Before finally leaving the shade of the great cedar that afternoon, Kenjiro carefully placed half of his remaining lunch near the entrance to the ant colony. A silent offering, a final gesture of gratitude to the hosts of a wondrous adventure spun from a fleeting dream.